各位与会嘉宾，各位先进前辈，各位关注和平民主的朋友，大家好。今天非常感谢基金会，我们有这样一个美好的机会来谈论我们所存在的世界，以及我们要建立的和平哦。那我想在今天这个活动的同一个时间啊，在另外一个场地有所谓的国防展啊。想一想就觉得为什么没有和平展呢？有非常多的国防论坛、国安论坛，为什么我们不能有和平论坛呢？所以我想有今天这样的一个活动，真的是非常非常的重要。那如果没有文化的和平呢，很可能就只剩下和谐啊，这个大家自己品味啊。那所以我想由我们这个基金会来办这样的一个论坛，我觉得是再重要也再好不过的。那我想今天呢，我们非常高兴呢，有两位讲者，接续者会做一些分享给各位。那我们首先呢，先介绍我们的 Emma。那 Emma 呢，其实是我们这个 Swiss Peace 这个包含这个和平的建构，还有做非常多的相关的和平的研究以及行动。那最近呢，也在拿他的第二个硕士跟互动设计、互动科技 （Interaction Design） 有关。从整体的到个体的，从文化面的到实体面的，那也开始结合科技，那也从数位科技到实体科技。那我们的黄彦霖先生我们在圈子里叫他豆泥，那也从数位发展部一段时间之后过去是医师，那到数位发展部，那现在呢又在哈佛担任这个 fellow。那我想今天的内容一定会非常的精彩。那我想一开始呢，我们希望能够让 Emma 来做一些分享。其实在整个过程当中，我自己也在前期的前置讨论上面，我也很深受启发。他在过去做了很多的所谓的 peace building 的一些行动。其实我们常常都在想，这个和平，我们好像都觉得是 do nothing， 好像战争是 do something。可是在这个新的时代里面 ，do nothing 就已经是在战争了。反而也许和平应该要 do something。所以我想从待会 Emma 的分享里面，也许我们可以知道如何去理解和平是需要而且可以透过行动的去建构。那我们先掌声欢迎 Emma 先给我们带来一个15分钟的分享，谢谢。
All right. Hello again. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really looking forward to this panel. Also, well done with the curation of this group, because I think we're going to have a really nice discussion together. Maybe just one small clarification. I do collaborate with Swiss Peace a lot. I was formerly employed there, but I'm actually not representing them here today. I work as an independent consultant. So just to be super clear about that. Okay, so first, I want to ask you a question because I'm curious, actually, to know. I mean, I'm not going to know your answer, but I want you to think about how positive or negative you're feeling about the impact of technology on society right now. So if we can all just imagine that there's like a long line on the wall behind me, and on one hand we have feeling negative about the impact of technology, and on the other hand we're feeling positive about the impact of technology. So maybe just take a minute and try to think about where you would place yourself on this continuum, more on the negative side or more on the positive side. Now, I think it's incredibly important for us to learn from both extremes, both ends of this spectrum, because we do need to be inspired by the possibilities of technology that are championed by the optimists who put themselves on this end. But we also need to always remember the harms that are highlighted by the pessimists. So this is especially true because it's not just about our own personal experience with technology. Technology impacts people in different ways for many intersectional reasons about their background, their access to infrastructure, location, languages they speak, digital literacy, gender, the list could go on and on. So If you're feeling undecided about where to place yourself on this spectrum, I invite you to put yourself somewhere in the middle. It's where I try to keep myself at too. I call this zone techno-realism, somewhere between the techno-optimist and the techno-pessimist, because I hope that we can understand there are a lot of positive impacts of technology, but they require intentional design. So we remain hopeful and curious about these possibilities, but we maintain always our skepticism. So as a peace builder, what I mean when I use that word is that I'm focused on facilitating inclusive dialogue in order to contribute to social cohesion and democratic participation. But as a digital peace builder specifically, I actually have two other priorities that I really focus on. So one is helping peace builders and peacemakers use digital tools in their work. So it's really focused on the tools. Things like how can we facilitate better in digital spaces? How can we use digital tools to organize for activism purposes? How do we use it as a data or context analysis, for collaboration, for research, strategic communication? So these are the things in this first category. But then on the other side, and maybe even more important than the first part, is analyzing and responding to how technology is impacting peace and conflict. So we have positive impacts from technology. It allows more people to participate in conversations, to share their testimony, to document their experiences, to exchange in safe places when it's not safe to meet in person, and to ignite movements for social change, just as a few examples. But of course, I can list many examples on the negative side too. So we are experiencing, many of us, information overload from digital sources. We have algorithms that are determining what content we're seeing. This is contributing to amplifying mis and disinformation, eroding trust in institutions, increasing polarization, and hardening ideological positions. And these things often lead to censorship or self-censorship. Also, these factors exist in a broader landscape of changing media and communication. I mean, the business models of news outlets are under increasing pressure. There's not always time for thorough fact-checking, or it's not always prioritized. We have influencers who have emerged as yet another source of information for many people. And the reality is our brains are just vulnerable to these emotionally charged posts that are meant to outrage us and increase our engagement on these platforms. So a key takeaway for this first part is really that we just always need to sit with the fact that digital technologies contribute both to harm and to transformation. And this is just the reality of digital peace building, is that we know we have these two ends of the spectrum. Okay, so now I'm going to share a few examples of digital peace building to make it a little more concrete what I mean. Several of these examples come from civil society organizations, not only, also from some international organizations as well. I've either been a part of them personally, or I have interviewed the creators of them as part of my research and mapping the field of digital peace building. There's unfortunately, I don't have time to go into too many details of each one, but I'm just going to give a little bit of info, and then if you have questions after, or please find me in the break. I always like to talk more about the details when we have time. Okay, here we are with the first example, which is coming from Uganda. It's a game called Choose Your Own Fake News, and it comes from a really innovative small civil society organization called Policy. They're using a methodology called pre-bunking, and it's a way of teaching the players of this game about media literacy so they're more prepared to detect and respond to misinformation when they see it. It's free, it looks nice, it has nice illustrations, and it gives the players a chance to choose their own adventure. There's 3 different characters who they can follow. And what's important is the storylines are really locally relevant to an East Africa context. So it's a really nice example of how to use games for this pre-bunking methodology. Accord AI is a new example, actually. I just learned about this one a few weeks ago. It's created by Conflict Dynamics International, and they created this AI co-pilot chatbot that's trained on a Sudan-specific peacebuilding archive. So it's meant to help peace builders, but it's also open to the general public in Sudan so that they can explore localized approaches to dialogue and governance there. It's also freely available, free to use. It works in English and Arabic. And what's unique about this bot compared to others is it cites its sources. All right, the Swiss-based organization Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, they've been working on this thing called social media codes of conduct, or sometimes they call them social media peace agreements. They've been doing this for several years in a bunch of different contexts. The photos I included on this slide are from Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it depends a little bit on each context, but generally what they do is they gather together political leaders, media, maybe civil society organizations, and they agree to avoid harmful online behavior like spreading hate speech and misinformation during an important period. So in these two examples, it's during an election period. It could also be during a mediation process, for example. These folks also used an open source tool called Polis to find consensus on the language of the document and the parameters, because there's so many stakeholders involved that it's better to use a digital tool so that they can come to an agreement. And then usually these are part of larger democracy or mediation processes, so it's just one component. Okay, this one is one of the projects that I was working on when I was with Swiss Peace. We also did it with I4P, a local NGO in Moldova, and Moldova UN was our partner for this one. It's called Platforma Moldova. We also used the platform Polis, and we used it because we were trying to get more youth involved in letting us know about the political topics that were most important to them in the upcoming elections. And it's becoming a more polarized context there. So it was a useful tool for us to have a dialogue with around 200 young people, to listen to them, and then we could use the results from this dialogue to set the agenda for an in-person consultation across generations that we organized. You can see, it's not that clear from this, but on the right-hand side of that slide is where there's the visualization of how the tool helped us identify different opinion groups, and that's the data that we could use to set the agenda for the in-person meeting. All right, now this one, there is this great program in Canada at Waterloo University. It's called the Grable Peace Incubator, and they offer mentoring, community, and funding to new graduates who are starting startups that are involved with either designing or using pro-social technology. I think it's such an interesting idea, and I would love for more universities to start innovation programs like this. We co-organized a meetup in Nairobi at a peace-building conference there called the Peace Tech Founders Forum, because we're trying to create an international community of peace tech founders. And then finally, this is another example. This one actually comes from Switzerland. There's a technical university there called EPFL. They organized a Peace Tech Hackathon. So it's one weekend where a bunch of students come together. There were about 70 students involved in this event. And there were 9 different teams working on a bunch of different peace-building topics. I, as representing Swiss Peace, was introducing one of the challenges for them to work on. The topic was how to build trust in digital mediation spaces. And so this was really great because basically all of the students were coming from super different fields, from medicine and science, and not really from a political science or international affairs type of background. And we could really get some fresh ideas from them, but also bring in a wider group of young people who are interested in learning more about peace and about pro-social technology. All right, so these examples are really just a few of the many, many digital peace building examples that exist out there, and I think some of these could offer some inspiration for projects that could happen in Taiwan. I can definitely say that me and my colleagues have been inspired by Taiwan's digital democracy for sure, so it's a two-way exchange. And also many of these are smaller civil society projects, so they're just going to be one piece in a bigger grand scheme of looking towards a national level of peace. But I really think that the one common thread is that we need transdisciplinary and multi-dimensional approaches to address these big problems of polarization, hate speech, all the things I keep mentioning, fragmenting, social cohesion, and so on. So therefore, I have a few kind of overarching recommendations of how we can approach these big topics. Because I mentioned a couple tools and methodologies. These are important, but it's actually less about the specific tool and more about how we can upskill ourselves to, one, practice our critical thinking, really learn how to ask questions and then actually listen to the answers. To be more interdisciplinary, we need more peace engineers, peace scientists, policymakers, designers, etc. Avoid siloing digital spaces because basically online and offline spaces are innately connected. So online violence often leads to offline violence and vice versa. And then we should stop letting the tech lead us. It's not about the tool itself. It's about the change that we're looking for. So we need to always stay true to the peace-building challenge that we're working on, and then we can work backwards to see what technology can help us achieve that goal, rather than finding a new flashy tool and using that to finding an application for it. One more thing I wanted to point out. It's been mentioned, Dr. Leung, she shared her article on Facebook a couple of days ago ahead of this event, inviting people to engage with her on the concept of peace in Taiwan and looking forward to today's forum. I think many of us might have seen it. Last time I checked it, there were over 1,000 comments. So I translated them into English, and I did do a quick analysis just of the mood of these comments and the types of messages. And of course, there were some that were constructive, but over 70%, based on how I tagged them, were hostile or negative. And not only that, but using sexualized threats, weaponizing gender and age. And of course, disagreement is always welcome, but abuse and trolling amplify hostility and they shut down debate. We can see also that, or we know rather, that this is not uncommon. Actually, female public figures around the world, on average, receive much more online hate than their male counterparts. And part of this is down to how the platforms are designed. They're not designed for equity and dialogue, and we can see this in their feature design and in their engagement incentives. So basically, we know that unless we're intentional about our digital spaces, the offline inequalities and power structures are most likely going to be replicated in the digital spaces. So to close, we have many examples of digital technology driving conflict, but I would argue that in order to do no harm as peace builders, we now must take a technology lens in our peace building work instead of simply ignoring this field or thinking that we just won't use digital technology. And on the other hand, we have a lot of examples of us using technology in a positive way to foster inclusive participation and documentation, etc., deliberation. But I wish I had more examples to share that were about digital technology actually driving peace on its own without us just using it. So this is where I invite all of us to maybe look to some offline spaces, community spaces, to learn how we can intentionally design the digital ones to be more inclusive and pro-social. It's our challenge and our opportunity, and it's what I'm looking forward to discussing more in the panel. Thank you.
谢谢 Emma 给我们带来非常精彩的分享哈。那对于不太熟悉的，我稍微简短自我介绍一下，我是葛如君我在过去呢是教书科技设计，那到了现在有一个公仆的帽子，在立法院服务各位，那主要做电子签章法、AI 基本法等等相关的科技法令。那其实是刚刚 Emma 有提到，我们在推动这个和平还有整个社会的前进，不是先找到一个很亮丽的、很炫的工具，而是先想好我们要做什么，我们要达到什么样的目标，工具是来帮助我们的。 确实啊，10年前这个政务委员蔡依林蔡律师把我带进了这个公共参与的路上。当时呢，蔡律师推动了这个 V 台湾，然后当时呢，我们也有这个 Polis 运用这个工具来协助我们去了解不同立场的人有什么样的一个共识在中间。那当时呢，我们一起跟这个前数发部部长唐凤一起努力。那这个唐凤部长呢，也成为了我跟下一位要来介绍这15分钟的这个黄燕玲，也就是豆泥之间的一个intersection 啊。那因为呢，豆泥呢之前在数发部，那也做了非常多的多元宇宙、数位韧性的计划。那我也非常感念他从这个医师的身份从本来是救助人到接下来有可能要透过数位的工具来救助这个社会跟世界所以我想我们接下来就掌声欢迎我们黄燕玲豆泥来为我们分享如何用数位的工具来看待我们的民主与和平。谢谢。
Hello， 大家好，我是豆泥。虽然我们今天的 session 是以科技为主但是在成为科技之前，我想大家都是读书人啊。对我自己，我相信大家应该都是龙老师的读者我大概是从国中开始就看龙老师的书，一直到现在。所以我在开始的时候是想要引用龙老师的一段文字我觉得非常非常适合今天的内容。那我就讲一遍好了，虽然只有15分钟，但我觉得还是要讲对，他写说野火集1985年。对，我不知道谁把台湾当作是家有人依依不舍地回顾过去的大陆，有人拿着绿卡飞向未来的大陆，更多的人既不想回到过去，也不想面对未来，也不晓得珍惜当下脚下的泥土。家可以暂时挥别，可以离弃，可以忘怀，但家永远是那么一个。40年后的台湾，有想走却走不掉的人，有可以走却不走的人，有一心一意留在这儿以今生今世的人。不管是哪一种只要把它当作家，心甘情愿也罢，迫不得已也罢，只要他把这里当作家这个地方就会得到关爱跟栽培。对，我引用这段话其实是有些意义的，原因是因为这是1985年的书现在是2025年，刚好过了40年，也就是40年后的台湾我们再拿回来现在看是什么样子，我想好像差不多。当然发生了很多很多的事情，但是有很多新的东西在这边发生，尤其是科技好，那第二件事情引用这个是因为龙老师在今年的联合早报新加坡的一个报道里面，我看到一个 session 我觉得很有趣。他说强烈的表达交给30岁的人写野火集的时候刚好是30出头，现在70出头有70出头该做的事情。那我就想说我好像也31岁，好像跟这个年纪差不多，那我们就来谈论表达吧，无论这个表达是强烈的还是不强烈温柔的这样子。好，那举2个小故事第一个是东京大学的故事，刚好这个故事的主持人在现场对，第一个故事是东京大学我大概在今年年初的时候去东京大学听了一场演讲，那场演讲是史丹佛的老师吴国光的演讲那场演讲老师的演讲内容其实很精彩，但我忘记大部分内容了。我印象最深刻的是现场有很多听众，都学生他们把脸遮起来，不论是戴口罩还是戴面罩把脸遮起来。我就问旁边的同学说为什么你要把脸遮起来啊？他就说他害怕现场有监视有来收集大家资讯的人，可是他还是很想听演讲，而且很多人戴着面罩的人还是问了很多问题这个让我印象非常的深刻，因为在那个现场他是想要表达但是没那么敢表达的，这是第一个。第二个故事是金门大概在6月的时候吧，我觉得7月的时候去金门参加了一场讨论 AI 的审议民主的这个会议，金门青年发动的他们在讨论什么呢？他们讨论金门话 金门话。金门话是闽南话一种，跟台语很像，但是有大概3-4成不太一样。为什么？因为金门没有被日本殖民过很多用词不是日本外来语，而是自己的金门话。那这些金门的青年很有意思他们有自己的本土意识，但是这些本土意识他们又不太敢很公开的在网络上讲，原因是因为台湾的本土意识跟金门的本土意识有一点点那么不一样所以那个讨论他们是尴尬的，而且他们的意识有时候又跟长辈不太一样。但是从 AI 这个金门话的语料保存其实反射了这样子的想法。 好，那这两个故事哦，其实跟野火集是有一点点相关的。我用了这个词叫做沉默不是美德，是耻辱。那个时间点是这样子，可是我想要讲的是，很多时候哦，到甚至是现在更加严重，很多人是没有办法，或是不太敢真的把想讲的话讲出来，无论他的立场是什么哦。那这时候我就想到一个词叫做厨房谈话，这是诺贝尔这个文学奖亚伊塞维奇其实写了一本书叫《二手时代》，他就是在写厨房谈话。这是什么呢？他在讲说苏联时期哦，几乎没有公共广场了，因为广场不是让你讨论公共议题的地方。那大家在哪里讨论呢？大家在自己家里面的厨房讨论，讨论久了以后，这些公共的议题在言说的传统下慢慢传承下来，成为当时的一种科技。它是一种低科技哦，但是这个低科技慢慢的让和平传承下来，当时是叫做和平演变嘛。那但是到了现在，我们或许可以讨论和平在这个科技的状态下，这个新的厨房在哪里哦？那对于集权者来说，他最乐见的就是现代版的寒蝉效应，大家不讲话了，不讲话把自己原子化了，就不讨论事情了。所以我想要讨论的是有没有数位的厨房这种东西哦。那另外一个词是这样子的哦，1985年也一样的是野火集哦，有一个非常强烈的表达吧，对，叫做人在福中不知福的下一代，如果继续大声嚷嚷啊，或许我们就有真正伟大的思想家、艺术家或政治家出现。其实这40年来也确实诞生了、孕育了非常多新时代的行动者哦。那现在发生了什么事情呢？举2个海外的案例哦。第一个是中国，中国在上个礼拜有一个文件泄密，在讲防火长城哦。这个防火长城最新的内容是，在中国里面要上网，外网不一定连得到，但是出现了一个更新的防火长城，叫做墙中之墙。其实一些省哦开始建构了自己省的长城，所以今天要跨省联系的时候，有一些敏感字眼被过滤出来的时候，它是没有办法到另外一个省的。所以在中国，如果你要讨论一些新的名词或者是相对敏感的言辞哦，它基本上是越来越难的。但是另外一边呢，这个跨过喜马拉雅山哦，到了另外一边，也是这个月发生的事情哦。尼泊尔有一个运动，这个运动我们现在叫做 Z 世代运动。为什么呢？因为这个运动的最后一根稻草哦，是尼泊尔政府把很多平台封掉了，包含抖音国外的 Instagram 啊等等的，一封掉大家这个 Z 世代哦，我还不太算 Z 世代 ，Y 世代的尾巴哦 ，Z 世代的人出来抗议，结果最后把整个政府重新颠倒过来了哦。他们甚至在选新的临时总统的过程里面，也使用了新兴的科技，包含 Discord 这些年轻人很喜欢在上面讨论的平台。当然，他们也用了 VPN 这样子大量的工具，为的是什么？为的是表达，为的是谈话，为的是讨论哦。那其实在这5、6年吧，其实国际上非常多的讨论在说，数位平台到底怎么了哦？到底为什么失灵了哦？那我这边做了一个很简单的分类啦，这些用词其实听起来有些蛮新的，但事实上它其实大家都可以理解一般发生什么事哦。我沿用野火集里面的词哦，一边是旧大陆，一边是新大陆哦。旧大陆发生了什么事情呢？我们称之为数位集权。数位集权是什么？数位集权是我们没办法好好的讲话，因为我们讲话的过程会害怕，会担心我们的词会不见了，或是我们被追踪。那具体的做法就是言论审查哦，跟资讯的操作。言论审查是人或者机器人去看你的文字，资讯操作是我们被强迫的在机器人或是真人的状态下给我们资讯，而且这个资讯是有意图的。另外一种是演算法压迫，这种演算法就是我们今天比如说在西方世界好了，我的工作忽然某一天被辞退了，原因是因为演算法认为我们的效率不佳。那这种状态下就是所谓的演算法压迫，尤其是对许多弱势族群哦。那因此我的旧大陆并不是指说单纯的某一个地理上的区位，而是某种集权的思想哦，它使用了数位的工具去成为新的压迫者。另外一边是新大陆哦，新大陆是什么呢？新大陆是有很多商业的平台出现啊，这些平台产生了一些副作用。在10年前，大家以为新的数位平台可以创造 新的民主新的和平，但是这10年下来产生了一些副作用，其中一个叫做 enshittification， 它其实是一个组合名词我把它翻译成平台软烂化，有人翻译成平台屎化啦。对，但是意思是什么呢？意思是平台一开始很好用，但久了突然被塞了好多广告，忽然变难用了，这是一个平台很容易出现的问题。第二个是 Z 世代的词叫做末日暴滑，就 doom scrolling， 就是躺在床上一直滑手机，滑到你睡着，滑到世界末日为止。这是一种极度躁郁的那种年轻人发明出来的词，我真的觉得非常的贴切，因为我以前也有这种末日暴滑的状态。当然第三种大家也可能习惯了吧，叫做言论或平台的极化，就是我们每个人都被关在一个同温层里面，今天你看到同温层外的人，你就会觉得他是仇寇台湾在哪里呢？我认为台湾在旧大陆跟新大陆的中间，这个中间其实还是有很多科技可以帮助我们的。所以我们的提问是这样子的：当公共广场被淹没的时候，公共广场是指说在数位的平台我们没有办法好好说话、好好谈话的时候，我们能不能有一个安全练习说真话、交换知识的地方？其实有，而且非常非常多的科技正在发生，包含刚刚 Emma 讲的各种案例，其实就用了非常多开源的工具。当然还有很多的谈话并不一定是在公共广场，而是在私人讯息的平台，无论你是用 Line、Signal、Telegram、WhatsApp， 其实很多的讨论是在里面发生的。那这样子的发生有没有机会重新翻转我们公共讨论的机会？其实是非常非常多的但因为今天时间的问题，所以我们就把它先放到一边。对，我想要讲的是，其实有更多新的科技，并不一定是去造成那个数位的集权或者是云端的封建我们其实还有很多 pro-social technology， 就是支持社会参与的科技。这科技不一定是高科技很多是我们每天都会使用的工具。毕竟人跟科技是一个共生的关系从旧石器时代一路到现在，其实都一样。台湾也是一样我们之前有人说台湾是小小多山的国家嘛，我想说台湾是多灾多难的岛屿或乡土吧。我们从2000年一路到2025年，其实发生了非常多事情。921大地震的时候，很多房子倒了，但是这个重建的基金这个当时借了很多钱，国家借了很多钱给灾民嘛。那这个灾民呢，在这10几年下来，他的还款率是100%所有的房子被重建回来，所有的钱都还给了国家，这是一个非常恐怖的一种状态当然里面也用到了很多科技或者是制度设计的东西。在2020年我们这个大家应该还熟悉，就是 COVID-19 的时候，当时其实民间动得比官方还快甚至有这种开源的口罩地图，或者是很多资源协调的措施在上面。我中间放的这个相片是我当时疫情还在当医生的时候拍的台中这个从医院看出去的景色真的是路上无车无人就是当时真的是一个封禁的状态。那2025年其实也一直好的故事一直在发生丹纳斯台风让台南的这个西南沿海其实受创非常的凶其中一个很有趣的或者是说很不 OK 的状态是，很多房子倒了，发现里面有石棉瓦，石棉瓦已经静止很久了，但是这些老房子里面跑出来的石棉瓦真的是造成了人体或是环境的危害石棉瓦是很细的这种纤维，你吸到肺里面你是吐不出来的，过了30-40年很容易得肺癌，这个肺癌几乎是无法逆转的状态。所以到底要谁来清运石棉瓦？这个环保署、环境部或是当地环保局那个清运的状态资讯也是不互通的，那怎么办呢？结果有一些灾民跟民间团体出来做了石棉瓦地图，他们把很多需要清运的这个石棉瓦标记起来，让大家去知道有这件事情，然后慢慢的去这个把拥塞的这个清运的状态去处理掉，而不是让灾民用手没有戴口罩的时候把它清掉。所以类似的科技其实是一直在台湾发生的这些科技我们可以统称为支持社会参与的科技，无论是好好讲话还是一起协作这样子的科技在台湾其实是有非常非常多成功的案例。人类是有言说的传统的，如果是愿意对话或是愿意协作这种状态或许是我们在新跟旧大陆之间可以突破重围的地方吧。所以我们正在面对下一波危险的网络霸权发展无论它是世卫集权还是云端的封建这都是因为有巨型的压迫者发生。 而且这些巨型的压迫者在现在这个时代其实不是那么明确的，我们是看到一个抽象的虚拟的东西了。当这种状态发生的时候，我们更难去讨论说那到底出了什么事情哦，因为我们很容易去指责我们看得到的人或是看得到的形象，这些虚拟的东西出现反而让人不知道该怎么办哦。所以我觉得颠倒过来吧，或许我们可以从我们每天讨论的人，我们的亲友，我们的同学，我们的这些运动或是行动上的人开始重新讨论哦。我觉得这可能就是现代版的厨房谈话吧。所以最后哦，颠倒过来讲哦，我们今天这个 session 虽然要讨论科技，我们其实有很多新科技可以讨论，不管是审议的科技，甚至 AI 怎么帮助社会，还有很多的是更底层的隐私的技术，或者是抗审查的技术哦。但是这些东西在更下面，其实是我们重新回过头来讨论我们的家，我们的这个乡土哦，到底我们想要在上面做什么事情。那我们知道要做什么事情了以后，再开始重新的跟人建立好的关系这样子。所以我想要讲的是，在数位的世界，有没有一个地方可以好好说话、好好讨论、好好协作，一起打造一个好好生活的地方。原本我的简报不是写这样子的，但是看到了龙老师的脸书以后，我真的觉得那个脸书好像病了，不是说使用者病了，是平台的演算法病了。那在这种状态下，我们或许有机会重新讨论演算法，或者是重新讨论我们想要讨论什么事情，怎么跟立场不同的人讨论。我想这大概是我这场演讲的一个目标吧。谢谢大家。
非常非常精彩的分享哦，我们的数位厨房，我们的和平的诞生地现在在哪里哈？我想刚刚豆泥的分享里面去分析了我们的数位世代分成旧大陆、新大陆以及台湾所在的位置哈。我这边想要先问一下 Emma 哦，就是我想 Emma 我们上一次对谈的时候有问说在台湾会待多长的时间，然后现在也应该有一段时间在台湾也有一些体验了哦。其实我也非常好奇，因为您也自己亲身参与，然后您也给了我们很多的案例，其实和平是可以亲手建造的，是可以参与的，是可以行动的，而不是什么都不做。那我很好奇刚刚豆泥把台湾放在了一个旧大陆与新大陆的中间的位置，我很好奇，想要请教 Emma， 在您看到的这个所谓的 peace building 的这样的一些，不管是方法论也好，或者是一个做法，或者运用科技的一些例子也好，你觉得台湾在您的这个 peace building 的这样的一个经验跟一个您的想法当中，台湾有没有什么样的一个特别的时程定位，是可以让台湾作为一个非常杰出的peace builder， 不只是为自己内部，也为全世界。也就是说，换一个说法，台湾现在是在什么样的一个这一个角色？我们是应该要再多看一些例子呢，还是因为我们有很多很强的数位科技我们有数位发展部，我们有很棒的像 G0V 这样的一个 community， 所以我们其实可以早一点的来做一些相关的 workshop 或者是 hackathon， 还是说其实台湾的这个产业很特别我们有很多的硬体产业，说不定我们可以从硬体产业着手，从产业来协助。我很好奇，台湾在您这个 peace building 的这样的一个观点来看，我们有什么样特别的角色？有什么样的一个行动是台湾现在最适合也可以做的起步？
Thanks for the question. Yeah, in a very short answer, I would say Taiwan could be involved in all of these things for sure. And I would say that, I mean, from my perspective, I really tend to work from and I'm interested in like a civil society perspective on peace building. So partly my answer comes from this perspective because I'm interested in this and it's where I work from more than kind of the war games type of thing. So this is where my answers are going to come from. But I do think Taiwan, I mean, it's been so nice to have, or, you know, we're around halfway, a little bit more through the fellowship time here. I've learned a lot about Taiwan, although there's still a lot more to learn, I'm sure. it is a unique place because it's a small-ish island, but yeah, high level of connectivity, high level of innovation, and I think this formulation can be quite cool. I think there's already, as I mentioned in one of my intros, I mean, learning from the digital ministry in Taiwan, I mean, it's like an example that we think about a lot in peace building. Also because, I mean, I would categorize this a little bit more in this like GovTech category, which is a few years ahead actually of the digital peace builders. So that's why we're starting to look to these other sectors to kind of try to figure out, okay, what have they been doing to get civic engagement? How can we bring these strategies into peace building? But I think there is maybe more of a chance to go now a little bit deeper. Like I think for sure Taiwan has the technical infrastructure and the digital literacy. But what I would love to see more, which maybe it's happening, I haven't seen it yet, but is like a next level analysis. So, I mean, I mentioned some things related to gender or more of an intersectional lens. I think how can we get beyond like the tech innovation itself and use that as the backdrop to go forward with these intersectional type of lens. And I think, as you mentioned, the hackathons, the innovation like labs and so on could be a really great place for Taiwan to take advantage of its like universities and intellectual resources, but then to focus it more like next level beyond just the tech itself.
确实哦，我觉得有时候我自己会觉得，好像台湾在这个和平的推动啊、讨论啊、行动啊上面，我们好像少做了一些。但是如果回过头去看哈，这个2015年啊，我们曾经在某大杂志上面被放在封面哈，说是全世界最危险的地方。但是10年过去了，我们现在还相对和平哈，不管是政府的努力也好，民间的努力也好，科技的社群的努力也好，工具的使用也好。某种程度来说呢，我们其实也非常非常的算是一个和平这个持续者的前段班吧，也许。不过也确实就像 Emma 讲的，我们其实还有很多事情可以做。那我们的角色、我们的地位以及我们所在的位置都非常的特殊。那我们就回过头来也想要问一下豆泥哈。其实我非常感动哈，因为看到您刚刚有提到的这个所谓对话的厨房啦哈。那但是我觉得我们常常在看，因为就像 Emma 所讲的，我们台湾其实很常会从科技的角度出发，然后我觉得也不知道为什么，其实大家好像会对科技有一种魔法般的崇拜、期待跟迷惘，觉得好像这个运用了科技端出来的结果就会是非常神奇而伟大的。这有点像套用你的 metaphor 哈，就有点像我们也许有一个和平的科技厨房，端出来的东西，在还没端出来之前，时刻都非常的期待，但端出来了以后，大家都给一颗星啊。这个过去我想您待过速发部，也许您有感触。其实我也很认同前速发部部长唐凤的很多的概念观点。但是速发部这个花了很多的力气，口罩地图非常受肯定，可是端出来的一些，比如说这个一些市集的机制啦，或者是某一些比较前瞻的思维啦，其实反而可能就会被大家过度期望，过度的想象，那反而就用一些比较这个大家会比较用乡民的语调来讽刺啦或批评啦，说什么点面线啦等等。所以我想要请教就是说，在这个运用科技以及数位的工具来创建，不管是和平也好，对话也好，你经历过，你自己觉得怎么样去不要有这样的一个 gate 不要让大家过度神化科技，不要让大家过度对这个魔法有所期待。也不要让这个所谓的对话的厨房，科技的厨房跟时刻之间的期望中间有所落差。您觉得有什么是可以来弭平这样的一个 gap？
听起来很像在接受咨询哦。
虽然我已经不是这个公务人员了，对，我
经验分享，
对，我经验也是多想自由
好，我 对感触蛮多的啦。那2个点吧，长话短说。第一个是再次引用野火集哦，什么样的人民有什么样的政府。1985年的时候是这样，2025年的时候可能也是。如果今天大家期待的是一种家父长式的政府的话，那数位政策也好，一般的政策也好，它就会变成一种家父长式的管控。这个东西在过去非常多可以讨论啦，包含户役政系统、健保资料库，或者是数位身份证这样子一些敏感的，到最后有一些争议的这些政策哦，其实这是一个很重要的。那我们如果希望有些东西不是大家政府管好，而是政府提供工具，政府促进人去讨论的话，那它才会有另外一种可能。那我相信过去的数发部吧，我在也好，我不在也好，其实有一部分这种社会参与式的科技是在一个重点的这个专案里面的，这是第一个。第二个是一般人吧，我们都很期待科技有一种神奇子弹嘛 ，silver bullet 出现，这个一枪就可以把吸血鬼打死哦，很多问题都解决了。不止科技啦，连像制药、医学其实都一样，大家期待有 A 可以解决 B， 那 A 出现大家就安心，但是不是啊？世界是非常复杂的，是非常多面向的。有时候用 A 去处理 B 就产生 C、D、E、F、G 的问题。其实在数位科技的世界非常非常的多。那问题出现在什么呢？因为大家认为科技可以解决很多问题，所以科技往往是容易要到预算的嘛，我们可以问问看葛立伟这样子。对，其实科技预算或数位预算是越来越多的，但是他们真的可以一出来就解决问题吗？并不是。那在这边想要提一个概念，就是 agency 吧，能动性。我们今天如果一个人一个公民，他有能动性，他是可以处理很多事的。但是能动性是一种 privilege， 是一种特权哦。今天如果10万青年10万军哦，台积轮班救台湾，他下班根本就没时间有能动性，这个去解决自身不管是劳工的议题、环保的议题还是数位的议题，那他就没有能动性。所以我们应该是回过头来想，从政府的角度也好，由下而上草根的角度也好，我们到底要怎么样才可以产生余裕哦，让大家重新的使用自己保护自己，或者是促进讨论的科技，让人可以有效的跟别人协作，解决我们自己在这片土地上的问题。我想这应该是某种翻过来想的概念啦，大概是这样。
是，我想也许这个台湾还是一个我们非常相对年轻的一个民主的发生地。那也许真正的做法确实是应该由下而上。那我们也正在努力。只不过我们整个在文化背景上面，确实很容易去期待一个由上而下的一个机制。不过科技其实是给一种技术的民主化了，也把能量民主化，也许就把这个所谓的动能再还给大家。如果我们愿意掌握在手中的话，所以换而言之呢，也就是和平的机会也就掌握在了每一个人的手上。如果我们认同和平是可以被行动跟建构的。那我想这个应该我们还有一点时间啊，所以不知道有没有在座的这个嘉宾朋友对于我们今天2位非常精彩的这个讲者有没有什么样的一个提问？好，请这边有一位，然后那边还有一位，谢谢这边这一位可以先。
好，讲者们你们好。那个今天在先前的演讲也好，或者是这场也有，就是大部分的讲者都有提到说，信任是和平中很重要的一环。所以我想要请教2位讲者，尤其是在这个数位的领域上面，这个数位信任该怎么实践？我们的下一步是什么？或者是最重要的应该要注意的地方是什么？谢谢。
这个是很大的问题哈。那我想2位讲者都可以简短的回答。因为这个数位信任这个关键字应该是在数发部可能跟你们的总体方针不是他们的已经是他们的总体方针哈。我不知道这个问题是不是豆泥要不要先简短的回答，然后我们可以让 Emma 也稍微回应一下。
感觉这个问题很像就是在做球哦，对，
他在
超赞人，对，数位信任我觉得很赞的是这几年开始越来越多人讨论。甚至成为联合国也好，或是台湾加入得了的国际组织也好的一些重点发展。但是信任其实我们把数位先拆掉，信任其实是一个很 很直观的东西嘛。我信不信任你？我跟你是亲友远近呢，还是我信任的是大人，就是那个更大的集体，还是我信任的是一种机制？这三种信任是完全不一样的概念。那在数位的世界里面，其实大家在谈数位信任，比较在谈的是最后一者，就是机制。数位的技术怎么确保机制上的可信？但是其实现在越来越多人在讨论这个大的政策，或是每个人跟人之间的那个信任，有没有可能在数位的世界发生？最简单的概念就是诈骗哦。我信任你，我才会被诈骗嘛。如果我不信任你，我当然不会被诈骗。那个信任的远近哦，今天是一个强制的规定，还是一个由下而上那个信任的堆积哦？我想这个当然重要啊，而且是数位的科技或数位的平台，日常生活一定会碰到的事情，大概是这样。
好，谢谢豆泥。Emma。
Yeah, thanks for this question. I love talking about trust in digital spaces because it's such a interesting, chewy topic that we can come at from a bunch of different sides. Normally, I try to break it down into a few different categories, I guess. I mean, for one thing, maybe even related to what you were saying about technology being magic, I think this can be totally, I relate to this type of statement or hearing it a lot. And I think helping to set expectations about what technology can and can't do does help with contributing to trust, because then people don't feel let down. They have a level expectation, because I think sometimes we have too high of expectations. But when it comes to actually building digital or trust in digital spaces, I think about it in terms of like, how do we trust the technology itself, that it's storing our data correctly, or that we're not being, surveilled, something like this. It's also how we can build trust with like community, people who we're talking to in a digital space that we maybe see or don't see, depending on what the setting is. And then also the trust in like the facilitator or the mechanism or kind of the organizer of some sort of digital process. So if I try to break it down in these three different angles, at least then these are more specific things that we can talk about. And maybe I'll give even one concrete example, because I think this came up a lot, especially during COVID, when we were at SwissPeace trying to convert a lot of our offline talks. Okay, I see that. I'll just try to say it quick. Into digital spaces. And some of these things that we were looking at were super practical. Like we had a program working with civil society in Syria, and this was previously an offline only group that went 100% online. It was super jarring. And we could see it was easier for us to transfer trust when it had been built offline. We could transfer it to digital spaces. But as new members joined, it took an additional effort to build trust among participants who had never met before. They didn't have the offline experience. So I think that's something really important for us to keep in mind, that we can't always just we have to approach the digital space as its own space and actually do some pretty straightforward facilitation tactics of how we can make sure that we're listening to people in the digital spaces, we're facilitating and like running an agenda in a way that everyone feels like they're heard and they're a part of it. And so this goes to like making sure everyone has a strong connection so that they can actually join the video call, to how you facilitate and moderate in the discussion. But I think on a very practical level, we have to think about this interplay between online and offline trust building between people.
好，谢谢 Emma 的回应哈。那我们最后一个提问，那简短，然后我们也可以稍微尽可能的简短做个回应，谢谢。
不好意思，刚刚几位讲者比较是在讨论科技跟推广的时候，比较是注重于民间团体跟个人可以怎么样重新思考运用科技的方式去推动和平嘛。但是就是我比较好奇是说，就是因为毕竟科技不是中性的，就是一个科技，它一个平台，它的演算法或者在平台的设计上，它本身就有一定的目的性。那就是立法院或是国家可以有哪些方式去居中介入，让科技跟现在 AI 跟不同的社群平台的设计可以尽量减少他们的风险，或者是促进更多有办法促进和平的对话机制这样。
对呀， 我们讲到个人啊，这个组织，那其实还有一个角色是国家。有没有简短的回应？那也许豆泥然后 Emma 也可以给我们一个简短的 closing remark。
我可以举一个简短的例子就好。这个哈佛很常讨论，台湾其实开始也蛮多人讨论。美国的犹他州今年通过了一个法叫做 Digital Choice Act 数位选择法。它的法干嘛呢？就是当你今天觉得你在脸书一直被骂，然后你觉得不 OK， 你想要换平台，它这个法让你可以把所有的资料，甚至是你的朋友名单等等的移去另外一个平台。那这个法过了以后大的各种平台都要能够做到能够互通的协定。那这件事情并不是只有国家正在做，大平台也在做。比如说 Threads 也是 Meta 的嘛 ，Meta 的 Threads 已经打通了，叫做联邦宇宙。你今天可以把你的东西在另外一个平台看到 Threads 的内容，你也可以在 Threads 看到其他支援联邦宇宙协定的内容。这其实是很重要的第一步，因为人有选择的权利，也有隐私的权利。你可以去选择你喜欢的数位服务，数位服务才有可能往偏向于使用者权益的方向发展这是一个很简短的案例。
好，谢谢 Emma 有没有什么回应？
First of all, I mean, I'm even just happy to get this question because I think the first step is to acknowledge that tech is not neutral, which is actually not something I hear all the time, and definitely not how the tech platforms describe themselves. They still insist that technology is neutral, and it's up to the users to make it such a toxic place. So I think this is something we still need to really push the point on. I'll just say one thing because I know we have to be quick, but I do think there's a lot of hope in this field we're calling peace tech. So actually learning from these non-peacefully designed tech platforms to then design new ones to kind of very strategically counteract those features. I mean, we have researchers who have developed, for example, like bridge-based algorithms of different ways that we can engage on platforms that actually promote social cohesion. They're not getting adopted on the big platforms so far, but I mean, we can develop our own platforms. Maybe they're not used every day for all communications, but when we are trying to really have important dialogues and conversations, we can turn to these spaces. And even if we're not developing a new technology from scratch, we could also think about, okay, how do we use this existing technology in a way that's going to be inclusive and really hear from a lot of voices. So that's where I'll leave that.
那我们再次掌声谢谢 Emma 跟豆泥，还有各位精彩的提问，谢谢。